The first thing I noticed was the coffee. Not the smell of my coffee, the dark roast I'd been buying from the same corner store for 3 years. This was something lighter, almost floral. Expensive. And it was coming from my kitchen. I lay there for a second, eyes still closed, brain still halfway in the fog of a 12-hour shift. My feet ached. My shoulders ached. Everything ached. I'd gotten home past midnight, too tired to even check if my husband was awake, just peeled off my scrubs and slid under the covers as quietly as I could. But now it was morning, and someone was making coffee in my kitchen, and it didn't smell like my husband. I opened my eyes. The ceiling was the same, the curtains were the same, the water stain in the corner I kept meaning to tell the landlord about. Same. Everything in the room was exactly as I'd left it, except for the faint sound of movement on the other side of the wall and the smell of coffee that didn't belong to me. I sat up slowly. The other side of the bed was empty. Which wasn't unusual. My husband, Owen, was an early riser. He liked to be at his desk by 7, said it was the only quiet hour of the day, so the empty bed didn't alarm me. Not yet. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. 7:14 a.m. 2 missed calls from my coworker about a schedule swap. Nothing from Owen. I pulled on a hoodie and padded toward the kitchen. The man standing at my stove was not my husband. He was tall, maybe late 30s, wearing a gray t-shirt and dark joggers. His back to me, pouring coffee into a mug that I recognized, the blue ceramic one Owen's mother had given us for our first anniversary. The man was comfortable, relaxed. Like he did this every morning. I stopped in the doorway. He heard me and turned around. He had kind eyes. That was the first thing I registered, even through the confusion. His eyes were calm and a little startled, like someone caught off guard but not guilty. "Oh," he said. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." He set the mug down. "I thought the unit was empty." I stared at him. "I'm sorry," he said again, slower this time. "My name is Patrick. I own this building." There's a specific kind of fear that doesn't feel like fear at first. It feels like the moment after you step off a curve you didn't see, that half second before you understand what's happening to your body. That's what I felt standing in my kitchen doorway looking at a stranger who said he owned my home. We rent this apartment," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "My husband and I. We've been here for 8 months. Patrick looked at me carefully. "Ma'am, this unit has been vacant for about 5 months. I've been doing repairs. I flew in from Portland last night. I was going to do a walkthrough this morning. I heard him. I processed the individual words, but my brain kept sliding off them like they were written in a language I almost spoke. "That's not possible," I said. "We pay rent every month." "To who?" I opened my mouth. Closed it. To Owen. Owen handled the finances. Owen had always handled the finances. When we first moved in, he said it was easier. His credit score was better. His name was on the account. He'd take care of the transfers. I had a demanding job. He was working remotely and had more bandwidth for the administrative stuff. It made sense. It had always made sense. To my husband, I said. Patrick didn't say anything, but something shifted in his expression. Not pity. Something more careful than that. I need to back up. I met Owen at a work conference 4 years ago. I'm an accountant, or I was, before I moved to a smaller firm closer to what I thought was our life. He was working in commercial real estate development, confident, detail-oriented, the kind of person who knows the right question to ask in every room. We dated for a year, got married in a small ceremony at a lake house in Vermont, and moved to Denver 8 months ago so he could take a position with a new firm there. Everything had been his idea. The city, the apartment, the timing, and I had said yes to all of it because when you love someone and you trust them, their ideas start to feel like your ideas. I never met his boss. He worked from home most days. I thought that was normal. A lot of people did, especially after everything. His colleagues were always out or on a call when asked about meeting them. He said the office culture was more independent. I didn't push. I never saw a lease for this apartment. Owen said he handled the signing before I arrived. I'd been finishing out my notice period at my old job, and he'd gotten there 2 weeks earlier to set things up. He texted me photos of the place, said it was perfect, sent me the moving date. When I arrived, there were keys on the counter and a bottle of wine and him, smiling like he just handed me the world. I didn't ask to see the paperwork. I know how that sounds now. I stood in my kitchen while the actual owner of my apartment looked at me with careful eyes, and I thought about every time I'd asked Owen something and gotten a reasonable answer. Every time I'd almost worried and then stopped myself because he always had an explanation. The lease was digital, he'd said. He forwarded it to me. He never did, and eventually I forgot to follow up. I am someone who reconciles spreadsheets for a living. I catch other people's errors before they become problems. And I had not once in 8 months seen a piece of paper with my name on it related to the place I slept every night. Patrick let me sit down at the kitchen table. My kitchen table, which I now understood was not mine at all. He made me a cup of that floral coffee and sat across from me, and we talked for an hour. He had bought the building 2 years ago as a rental investment. The apartment had been listed, briefly, with a property management company he'd since parted ways with. When he looked into it, he found that a man, matching the description I gave of Owen, had contacted the company early in the listing period, expressed interest, then somehow obtained a copy of the keys and the unit code before any lease was signed. The management company thought he was a prospective tenant. He'd used that window, and then the listing was pulled, officially vacant, while Owen moved a wife in and collected whatever money I thought was going toward rent. "How much were you paying?" Patrick asked. $1,800 a month, I said. He nodded slowly. He didn't say what I knew he was thinking, that nobody had seen a cent of it. I called Owen while Patrick was still sitting there. I needed to hear his voice. I needed him to explain. I needed there to be an explanation. The call went to voicemail after 2 rings. I tried again. Voicemail. I texted, "Call me, now. It's urgent." I watched the message sit there unread for 3 minutes. 5, 10. I opened our banking app, the joint account he'd set up when we moved, where my paychecks went and the bills were paid from. I had full visibility, but had never had reason to scrutinize it, the same way you don't reread an email you sent yourself. There was $214 in the account. The previous balance, before my last paycheck cleared and was transferred out 2 days ago, had been over $40,000. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Then I unlocked it and stared again. Patrick, to his enormous credit, did not rush me. He refilled my coffee. He said quietly that I could take as long as I needed and that he wasn't going to ask me to leave. Not today. I called the non-emergency line for Denver PD. I explained what I could, which wasn't much, because I was still assembling it in real time. They took a report. They connected me with a detective named Carver, a woman with a flat, precise voice, who told me not to contact Owen again and to document everything I had. I went through my phone for the first time, looking at it as evidence rather than a record of my life. The rental confirmation Owen had texted me when we first moved in. I pulled it up and looked at it closely for the first time. The logo on the letterhead was slightly blurry. The address formatting was wrong. The property management company's name was misspelled by 1 letter. I had seen this and not seen it for 8 months. Detective Carver called me back that afternoon. Owen, or whoever he was, had 2 previous fraud investigations in other states, Texas and Ohio. Different names used, different women. One had been a teacher, one had been a pediatric nurse. He seemed to have a type, professional women, relocating for new chapters, trusting enough to let someone they loved carry the logistics. "He's done this before," she said. It wasn't a question. "How long has he been doing it?" I asked. "We're still building the picture," she said. "But the earliest case we can link goes back about 7 years. I went to bed that night in the apartment of a man I had never met before this morning because he had offered me the guest room and I had nowhere else to go and no one in Denver I knew well enough to call. My mother was in Ohio. My closest friend was in Boston. I had moved here for a life that had, in the space of a single morning, turned out to be a stage set. Patrick ordered Thai food and left it outside the guest room door. I heard him knock softly, say "Food's here," and walk away. I sat on the edge of the bed and ate pad, see-ew out of a container, and tried to figure out what I actually knew versus what I had been told. What I knew, my name, my job, my mother's phone number, my social security number, that I was good at math and bad at asking questions that might make someone I loved uncomfortable. What I had been told, that Owen loved me, that we had a home, that our life was being built. The next 3 days were procedural in a way I will always be grateful for because procedure keeps you from having to feel things in real time. I filed the full fraud report. I contacted my bank and flagged the account. I called my firm and explained in broad terms that I was dealing with a family emergency. They were kind about it. I called my landlord back home, the storage unit where half my furniture still sat because we'd said we'd send for it later, the credit card companies. He hadn't touched my individual credit cards, small mercy. The joint account and the cash were the main targets. Detective Carver called on day 2. A woman in Colorado Springs had reported a man matching Owen's description attempting to rent a furnished apartment using documentation that turned out to be fraudulent. He'd left before police arrived, but it told us he was still in the state. I did not call him. I did not text him, even when my phone buzzed on day 3 with an unknown number and I answered and heard his voice. Hey, casual. Like nothing. I said nothing. I know you must have questions, he said. I can explain everything. It got complicated, but it's not what you think. Detective Carver had told me, if he makes contact, stay calm. Keep him talking. Don't tell him what you know or what you've done. I had practiced this in my head. I had thought I was ready. I said, where are you? It doesn't matter right now. I need you to trust me. I want to understand what happened, I said. My voice was even. I was proud of that. There were some problems with the lease, he said. Administrative stuff. I was going to fix it. I just needed more time. I heard him breathing. I thought about the teacher in Texas, the nurse in Ohio. I thought about whether they had also stood in kitchens with their hearts in their throats trying to hold a conversation that felt like walking a tightrope over something enormous. Come home, I said. We can talk about it in person. There was a pause. Okay, he said. Tomorrow. He didn't come the next day. Or the day after. But Detective Carver traced the call to a cell tower near Pueblo, which narrowed things considerably. I stayed in Patrick's guest room for 11 days. I want to be honest about that part because it is the part that sounds strange from the outside. A woman staying in the apartment of a man she met during a crisis. I understand how it reads. But Patrick was a retired structural engineer who had a daughter my age and who kept strict, respectful distance and asked nothing of me except that I leave a light on if I was going to be up past 10, so he'd know someone was still awake. He brought coffee to the kitchen table every morning. Sometimes we talked. Mostly I sat with my laptop and he read. It was the quietest I'd been in years, and I think that was what I needed. Quiet enough to hear myself think. On day 9, I called my mother. I had been putting it off because saying it out loud to her would make it a thing that had happened to me, and not a thing that was happening to me. And I wasn't ready for that distinction. But I called her on a Tuesday afternoon while Patrick was out at the hardware store, and I told her everything, and she was silent for almost a full minute before she said, in the voice she uses when she is furious and trying not to be, "Come home." Not yet, I said. Why not? Because I'm not done. I'm not sure what I meant by that. Maybe that I wasn't ready to be the person the story happened to. Maybe I needed to be in the same city as the detective, the same building as the evidence, the same room where I had stood in my kitchen doorway and watched the whole thing come apart. Owen was arrested on a Thursday 17 days after I'd woken up to someone else's coffee. Detective Carver called at 9:46 a.m. He tried to rent another apartment, this time in Pueblo, using a different name, but the same photo ID pattern he'd used before. The landlord had seen a bulletin. He was in custody. I sat in Patrick's kitchen and cried for the first time since all of this had started. Not the way I thought I would, not heaving, not loud. Just quiet and steady. Like something had been released. Patrick came in from the garden, saw my face, and set a box of tissues on the table without saying anything. Then he went back outside. I don't know if he knew or just understood that I needed the room. Either way, it was exactly right. The legal process is ongoing. I'm told the money recovery is complicated. Some of it was moved through accounts that will take time to untangle, and financial fraud cases move slowly. I have a lawyer now, a real one who I found myself and paid for with money from my own account in my own name. I moved back to Ohio 6 weeks ago. I'm working remotely for the time being. My mother and I have dinner twice a week, and she doesn't bring it up unless I do, which I appreciate. I think about the things I didn't ask. Not because I blame myself. I've spent a lot of time being careful not to do that, because it's a trap, and Detective Carver warned me about it early. The people who do this are professionals, she said. They know exactly which questions to answer and which ones to make you feel bad for asking. You weren't naive. You were targeted. I believe her. Most days. But I do think about the lease. I think about how easy it would have been to say, just once, "Can I see the paperwork? Can you forward that to me?" I know you said digital, but I'd feel better with a copy. I didn't ask because I didn't want him to think I didn't trust him, which was, of course, exactly what he was counting on. The last time I spoke to my mother about it, she asked me what I would tell someone else going through the same thing. I thought about it for a while. I said, trust is not the same as never checking. You can love someone completely and still want to see the lease. A person who loves you back will hand it over without making you feel small for asking. That's not a lesson I wanted to learn this way, but it's the one I have and I'm keeping it. My name is on my apartment now. The utilities, the lease, the mail, all mine. It's a small thing, a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor with windows that face east and get the morning light. The coffee I make there is dark roast from the same kind of corner store I used to go to. It smells exactly right. I spent a lot of time thinking about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in some abstract philosophical way, just in the plain practical way that you think about things when you're sitting in your childhood bedroom at 32 years old, starting over. Owen didn't succeed because he was brilliant. He succeeded because he understood something about human behavior that I hadn't fully reckoned with. That trust, when it goes unexamined, starts to look exactly like willful blindness. And that people who want to take advantage of you will always look for the place where you've decided not to look. I decided not to look at the lease. I decided not to follow up on the forwarded copy he never sent. I decided every single month for 8 months that asking again would mean I didn't trust him, and I cared more about him feeling trusted than I cared about knowing the truth. That wasn't love. That was me outsourcing my own judgment because it was easier. I don't say that to be hard on myself. I say it because understanding it is the only way to not repeat it. Here's what I've come to believe. Intelligence without the courage to use it isn't really protection. I am good at my job. I am careful, methodical, detail-oriented in ways that other people sometimes find exhausting. And none of that helped me, because I left it at the office. I brought my competence to work and left my instincts at the door of a relationship I wanted to believe in. That's not a character flaw. It's a very human thing to do. But it's also a thing worth naming, because once you name it, you can change it. What Patrick did for me those 11 days was something I didn't know I needed. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer explanations or opinions or tell me what I should have done. He just made coffee and left food outside the door and gave me the space to figure out who I was without a story someone else had written for me. That kind of steadiness is its own form of generosity, and I've tried to carry it with me. That idea that sometimes the most useful thing you can offer someone in crisis is just a room that's quiet and safe. Detective Carver told me early on that the people who do this are not random. They look for someone capable, someone trusting, someone building something new. They find the moment of transition, a new city, a new chapter, a little bit of hope, and they walk straight into it. Knowing that didn't make me feel better exactly, but it made me feel less alone in what had happened. And it made me angry in a way that was useful instead of paralyzing. Anger, it turns out, is a reasonable response to being lied to. So is grief. So is the uncomfortable work of sitting with the fact that you made choices you can't unmake and doing it anyway. Not to punish yourself, but because that's what it takes to actually move forward rather than just moving away. My name is on everything now. That's where I start every morning. A small, ordinary fact that means more to me than I can fully explain.